We've got to talk about this newly released body cam footage in the George Floyd case. It's 18 minutes long, and it just precedes the infamous clip of this officer with his knee on Mr. Floyd's neck. And when you watch this 18-minute video, you realize that there's much more going on than meets the eye. Mr. Floyd is acting erratic. He's hallucinating, paranoid. He's not cooperating with the police, resisting arrest, and clearly on some type of drug or drugs. Toxicology tests show that he had fentanyl, THC, and methamphetamine in his system, and he was being arrested for passing a counterfeit $20 bill. And he was acting suspicious in the store at the time. That's why the police were called. But what you may not be aware of is that there was also another gentleman with him in the vehicle at the time when he was stopped. And this gentleman did cooperate with the police, showed his ID, answered all their questions, so he had no issues with the cop whatsoever. But Mr. Floyd, on the other hand, was apparently suffering from the effects of these drugs he was taking, not in the right frame of mind. I mean, he was all over the place. One minute he said he was fine, the next he's claiming he's claustrophobic when they're trying to put him in the police SUV. So did Mr. Floyd die as a result of that officer's knee being on the back of his neck? Because in this 18-minute video, he's saying that he can't breathe. He's saying he can't breathe before he was even on the ground. So was it the drugs that killed him? Was it this officer's actions? I think it's time that we take a different perspective here. Start looking at things from the angle of facts, logic, reason, instead of emotion. So listen up, BLM, listen up, Antifa. Now, I know from personal experience, I have a family member who suffers from manic depression, what they now call bipolar disorder. And I just love how they're changing all these medical terms to make them sound more politically correct or socially acceptable. See this commercial on TV for tardive dyskinesia. I'm watching this thing, I'm thinking, ma'am, you're way too self-conscious. Back in my day, when I was growing up, we called that a nervous twitch. That's all it is, a nervous twitch. But you got to take medicine for a nervous twitch? Give me a break. I think it's just a ruse to get people on this medication. I mean, that's just my humble opinion. But that's for another time, another topic, another day. But getting back to Mr. Floyd, there are some serious questions here. Were the police really responsible for his death? Was the death the result of his own actions? Maybe we'll never know for sure. But BLM and Antifa going out and torching these cities to the ground, toppling monuments, saying people should kneel for the national anthem, when they haven't even done the research on these cases, I think is putting the cart before the horse, isn't it? So perspective. We need perspective. I don't agree with what this officer did by having his knee on this gentleman's neck, but you've got to watch this 18-minute video. Now, this reminds me of the Rodney King case back in 1992. And I was just entering high school at the time when that happened. Now, what people don't know is that about 2 or 3 weeks before the Rodney King riots, there was a case involving a girl named Latasha Harlan. She was 14, 15 years old, and she had been shot and killed by a Korean store owner. And in the 1980s, late 1980s, early 1990s, you had a lot of these Koreans that were moving into this, or these particular neighborhoods in LA, and they were taking over these convenience stores. And there was this rift between the African American and Korean community at the time. And in fact, it was a lot of these Korean businesses that had gotten targeted in the LA riots. Well, what people didn't know about this case is that Latasha Harlan's had gone into this convenience store, stole a $2 bottle of juice. She got into a fist fight with the Korean store owner. Her name was Soon Da-ju. And Soon Da-ju was given leniency by the judge in the case because she did not have a previous criminal record. And this kind of lit the fuse for what would happen a few weeks later in the Rodney King riots. But what people didn't see was 3 seconds before the famous clip of these officers taking a beating to Mr. King. And in that 3-second clip, Rodney King is very combative. And he had actually been stopped because he was speeding. He had been going over 100 miles an hour in a residential area. And he had cocaine in his system, PCP, I believe it was. So he was high on drugs. He was speeding. He was being combative. Now, I'm not justifying what these officers did in the Rodney King case, but I'm saying that, once again, perspective. You got to take a look at the whole picture, the whole video, not just 3, 4, 5 seconds to make a decision. And what the public saw, what was being broadcast on the news, is not what the jury saw during the trial in the Rodney King case. Because the jury got to see the whole video. Well, that's the same thing here. Now, in the case regarding Latasha Harland, Soon Jaju had actually pulled out a gun and was giving some warning shots. She had shot a weapon from the side, tried to get this person out of her store, and one of the bullets hit the back of Latasha's head. Killed her. Sad case, truly sad case. But it got buried in the mix of everything just before the Rodney King riots. But the Latasha Harland's case mixed with what happened with Rodney King, and it just all blew up. And you have these LA riots. But you move forward, same thing today. It's out of the same playbook, folks. The Rodney King riots. These same people that were rioting in these cities are rioting in these same cities now. They never bothered looking into the case, never bothered looking at the facts. We saw it in Ferguson. We saw it in Baltimore. Now, please, I'm going to say this again. If I have to say this 20 times in this video, I will. I do not defend what may or may not have happened with the cops. If they were too aggressive, I don't defend that. But a lot of times, you're going to find that in these cases, the quote-unquote victim is not necessarily as innocent as they're being made out to be. Now, I got a question for you, BLM Antifa. Why is it so hard for you to admit to that or to accept that? Now, guess who hid this video, this 18-minute video of Mr. Floyd? None other than Democrat Attorney General of Minnesota, Mr. Keith Ellison, who went on TV and said he wanted to be transparent. No, I don't think you wanted to be transparent, Mr. Ellison. I think you saw this 18-minute video. You weren't happy with the result because it didn't fit with your narrative, didn't jive with what you thought the storyline should be, so you hid the video. And now, as a result, these cities are burning to the ground because of people like you. I'm calling out Mr. Keith Ellison. You see what happened the other day in one of these committee hearings in D.C.? Ted Cruz was speaking. He was asking these Democrat representatives, what's your views on Antifa or BLM? Why are you not calling these violent activists out? Now, you might have some peaceful BLM members, okay? But from what we've seen, a lot of it's been violent. They're attacking police headquarters, toppling monuments. And that must make you feel really good, doesn't it? BLM, doesn't it, Antifa? I mean, you really have accomplished something, right? Well, the truth is you've accomplished nothing. All you've done is burn something to the ground or topple a monument. It hasn't made things better. It's actually made them worse. Or is that the entire goal in your movement, just to make things worse? Because America is such a crap country, right? You know, I can't stand these people. I just cannot stand these hypocrites. They want to talk about how Black Lives Matter, or this matters, or the for X, Y, Z, social justice, racial equality. Oh, and did you see what happened with Oprah Winfrey? She's on this the white should apologize kick. White man should apologize kick. Really, Oprah? You're making millions of dollars a year? I'm not a millionaire. I talked about this on my previous video. I love doing these videos for my audience because I love doing these videos. If I make money off of it, great. If I don't, well, fine. But I'm not kneeling for the national anthem. I'm not going around and saying that it is my fellow white man's fault for my failures, because as I've talked about many times on this series, I'm of Irish and German descent, and God knows how the Irish and the Germans were treated in this country during World War I and World War II with the Germans. Trust me, you wouldn't want to have been a German immigrant coming to this country during World War I and World War II. Huge anti-German sentiment. You wouldn't have wanted to have been Irish in the 18th or early part of the 19th century, when you have posters that are portraying the Irish as drunken monkeys, and they're being denied employment. Or they're being starved to death at gunpoint by the British during the potato famine. You tell people that, and it's like the deer in the headlights look. That actually happened? Yeah, that actually happened. It happened to white people. I'm sorry, folks. It really gets me. It really gets me. So you have groups like BLM and Antifa that are claiming racial inequality, they're for social justice, and yet they're not willing to march for the 7,047 black-on-black homicides that occurred in 2018, as I've mentioned in a previous video, or for David Dorn, the retired black St. Louis police officer who was killed by looters who are marching for black lives. Come on, folks, wake up. But this Keith Ellison character in Minnesota, sitting on this video, how dare you, Mr. Ellison? How dare you? What's going on in Portland and Seattle, wherever, New York City, Austin, I put that at your feet. And other people like you. Now, I'm not trying to single you out, but you represent what we've got going on in Congress. You represent what's wrong with this country right now. What's wrong with this country isn't the white man. What's wrong with this country isn't the system or necessarily police. I think the problem is people's attitude and their refusal to take responsibility for their actions. Now, it's sad that Mr. George Floyd died, or that Freddie Gray died, or what happened to Rodney King in 1992, or Latasha Harlins. But for every action you take, there is a risk. You engage in risky behavior, then you have to accept the risk that come with it. Oh, I'm not supposed to say that today because that's politically incorrect, because everyone needs to be a victim. Well, I'm not going to be a victim. I'm going to call things as they see them. I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat or even an independent. I happen to be an independent voter. I look at things from the point of view of facts, logic, reason. If it don't jive, it don't jive. But you need to go and take a look at this body cam footage. 18 minutes. And you'll see that Mr. Floyd was clearly on some type of drug. He was acting irrational. He was having an episode, if you will. And he was resisting arrest. There's no question that Mr. Floyd played a role in his demise. There's no question about that. And yes, the police should have handled this situation differently. But if he's saying in this 18-minute video that he can't breathe before he was even on the ground, then what does that tell you, folks? But I guess BLM or Antifa is not going to care about this video, right? Because it doesn't go with their narrative. All I'm saying is let's have some perspective. Coming full circle here. Let's look at things from the facts, logic, reason, instead of burning down cities and toppling monuments. Instead of kneeling for the national anthem. You should be standing up during the national anthem. Said it before, I'll say it again. The greatest country the world has ever known. The most fair, most prosperous, freest nation on the planet. I mean, how else would Oprah Winfrey be able to make millions of dollars a year if there was really serious racial inequality in this country? And the system was trying to keep a particular ethnic group down. I don't think Oprah Winfrey would be making millions of dollars a year. And guess who her audience was back in the day? Majority were white women. That's who drove her audience. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please click that like button, subscribe, hit me up on Instagram at #JasonComposes, or you can leave comments below. This is Voice of the Composer saying peace out, and I will catch you next time. Stay safe, everybody, and God bless this great country.